And Massey and Bush arrived at 82 Harley Street. And Massey knocked on the door and went into Dr. Swade's consulting room and found Swade in a Savile Row suit, his Gucci shoes protruding under his desk. Some socialist. Massey, you will now be aware of the strangulation of Mrs. Marigold Meadow. And Swade says, yes, Dr. Festenstein told me. She was such a sweet person. Massey, you know full well about the trouble you had with a certain General Lido. Can you tell us more about it? And Swade says, I'm afraid I am just recovering from a nervous breakdown caused by General Lido. He ruined my life. He is a potentially dangerous homosexual psychopath, although I shouldn't be breaking the Hippocratic Oath. He came to see me on several occasions and made lewd sexual advantages towards me. He wrecked my practice and was invariably rude to Mrs. Meadow. In what way? Said Massey. He was always brushing rudely past her, calling her a bloody silly woman. He was forever pulling rank with her by saying that no general was accustomed to taking orders whenever she ticked him off when he smoked cigars in the waiting room. Massey, can you think of any reason why General Lido murdered her? Swade, I have every reason to suspect that General Lido strangled her. He's a psychopath, as I said. Massey, where were you at 8 o'clock on the evening of Wednesday the 9th of July, this being the approximate time of her murder? And Swade says, I was seeing my own psychiatrist because I am in a severe state of trauma because of General Lido's disgusting behavior towards me. Massey, where do you see your psychiatrist? Where are his rooms? And Swade says, I don't know where his rooms are. I asked him to come to my consulting room, and I had my therapy there. His name? Asked Massey. Swade says, Dr. Piers Wolfson of number 12 Harley Street. Massey says, let me go back to General Lido's lewd advances towards you. Swade says, he said, have you seen the film The Silence of the Lambs? And I replied, I don't eat my patients. General Lido grabbed me by the crotch and demanded, would you like to eat me? Swade continues, another time he was drunk and tried to pull me down on top of him. Bush had hysterical giggles. When he did this to me, he dislocated my back. I now have to wear a John Bell and Cronin surgical corset. It was then that Bush had hysterical giggles. And what was General Lido complaining to you about? Said Massey. Swade, as this is a murder inquiry, I can break the Hippocratic Oath. He said he was terrified of answering the phone and being informed that someone had been taken ill. Also, one morning, he got his chauffeur to drive him to my private house in Dulwich Village, where my wife and I were having breakfast. He and Festenstein, a rival of mine, as you know, repeatedly plotted and also persecuted easy bait like poor Mrs. Marigold Meadow. Massey says, all right, Dr. Swade, sorry to have taken up your time. And Massey and Bush, the two cops, head for Lido's Queen Anne house in Regent's Park. Massey rang the bell and flashed his card. Lido's housekeeper, Mrs. Mills, showed the two detectives in, and Jenkins happened to be in the house at the time. Jenkins told Massey that General Lido had gone abroad for a few days in the sun to Cap-D'Antibes. Massey said to Jenkins, do you know where your boss was at approximately 8 o'clock in the evening of Wednesday the 9th of July? And the chauffeur says, well, at 7:30 that evening, General Lido asked me to drive him to 82 Harley Street. We arrived at 7:50. He rang the bell repeatedly and went on and on and on ringing in a very, very rude way. When no one answered, he started kicking the door and shouting. This is what Lido is reported as having done by his chauffeur Arthur Jenkins. Massey said, what did he want, do you know? Jenkins says he was looking for his psychiatrist, Dr. Swade. He was hysterical. Eventually, a pleasant middle-aged lady opened the door. My boss was hysterical, as I said. I couldn't take any more. I was intending to hand in my notice anyway. I just drove off and left my boss outside 82 Harley Street at 7:50. Later on, my boss returned to his Regent's Park house by taxi. It was about 9 o'clock. He packed up a suitcase and left in a taxi for Heathrow Airport. He was still screaming and shouting and said he was going to have a few days' rest in a hotel at Captain, as you know already. Massey says to Bush, General Lido obviously killed Marigold Meadow. He's a fucking nutter, but we have other suspects to interview. I've got Lido's address book here. Jenkins gave it to me. Massey sifted through the address book and found the name Oliver Bong, a back specialist in Putney. Bong was most unusual. His father had been Japanese and his mother was English. He was 80 years old, but looked 20 years younger. He did not have a patient with him when Massey and Bush called. His wife, 40 years younger than he, opened the door. She was wearing a white coat. Oliver Bong was solidly built and completely bald. He was wearing a bright red blazer with the initials OB embroidered on the lapel. He also wore a turquoise scarf. Overall, he looked like a retired gangster. He sat facing a long table covered with a white linen cloth. And Massey said, Your name is listed in General Lido's address book. This is a murder inquiry. Can you tell us when you last saw him? Asked Massey. And Oliver Bong looked at his diary and said, Oh yes, he came here complaining of a bad back on Monday the 7th of July. I had Philip in here just before that. And Massey barked, Philip who? And Bong says, His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. I also had Charles in the week before that. And Massey barks, I'm not interested in your other bloody patients. What I want to know is, did General Lido's behaviour seem odd in any way? And Bong says he was very rude. I told him there was nothing wrong with his back. He used pretty fruity language and refused to pay the bill. When I threatened to call the police, he asked me, How would you like a carload of the boys? Massey said, Did you in any way think he was capable of strangling an innocent woman? And Bong replies, A man like that would be capable of anything. The answer is yes, I do. Massey said, Thank you for your help, Dr. Bong. It's possible we may come back to see you again. Then the two detectives, Massey and Bush, interviewed Brian Fairweather, the warden at the Spiritualist Church in Acton, in order to find out whether Alan Partridge could possibly have been responsible for Marigold's murder. Fairweather said Partridge had been at the church the whole evening. Therefore Fairweather was, if he was telling the truth, a perfect alibi. Within a few days, Lido returned to his house in Regent's Park. Massey and Bush called on him. His first words were, Has someone been taken ill? Massey said, We've come to discuss the murder of Mrs. Marigold Meadow. Lido, Who? Massey says, Surely you must know, Mrs. Meadow, the receptionist at 82 Harley Street. Lido says, Oh, that woman. I know who you mean now, but I had no idea what her bloody name was. Massey says, Where were you at about 8 o'clock in the evening of Wednesday the 9th of July? And Lido says, I was convalescing in the south of France. And Massey says, I don't believe you. Would you mind accompanying us to the police station, please? Lido says, Bloody hell, sir, how long is all this going to take? And Massey says, As long as is necessary. Lido was taken to a windowless cell in which Massey said, Your chauffeur, Mr. Jenkins, has told us you instructed him to drive you to 82 Harley Street on the evening of Wednesday the 9th of July. At approximately 8 o'clock, he, Jenkins, said he saw you getting into a scuffle with Mrs. Marigold Meadow on the steps leading to 82 Harley Street. Lido, in that case, my chauffeur is a reprobate and confounded liar. Massey, this is not what appears to be the case. Fabian Julius Lido, we are arresting you and charging you with the murder of Mrs. Marigold Meadow on the evening of Wednesday the 9th of July last at 8 o'clock. Lido is confined to a cell, and he remained in custody for 2 months before his trial at the Old Bailey. The authorities confiscated his pills, and the withdrawal symptoms from these were fearsome. He screamed, scratched himself all over, and banged his head against the walls of his cell. Sergei Festenstein met him in the visiting area and passed him a bag of pills and an opened pot of caviar under the table. Lido secreted the pills and the caviar in the pockets of his oilskin coat. Festenstein and Lido sat on either side of a dirty formica table, which was covered with brimming plastic ashtrays once more. "Hello, Nanny," said Lido. "Damn nice of you to come like this." "Hello, Jen. Don't worry. You'll pull through this." And Lido says, "I didn't bump the old bag off, Nanny." And Festenstein says, "I know you didn't. Don't refer to her as an old bag. She was a very sweet woman. She was a rare specimen. On another matter, I've found the best lawyer there is. He's the toughest bull in the ring, and his name is Bernard Greenman. He's never lost a case in his life." And General Lido sat bolt upright and produced some papers from the inside pocket of his oilskin and surreptitiously handed them to Festenstein under the table. Lido says, "You should know this, Nanny. My chauffeur Jenkins got careless and left these papers in his workshop attached to my house one day when he was hungover." And he also says, "Jenkins has kept a diary of hate against me. If his diary is read out in court, the verdict might easily be in my favor." Lido continues, "Read this, Nanny. There is a heading, 'Punishments delivered to General Lido in return for his disgusting attitude and behavior.' Punishment number 1. Sent Lido anonymous leaflets about impotence, premature ejaculation, and erectile dysfunction. Punishment 2. Sent Lido different taxis round to his front door every 15 minutes of the night. Punishment 4. Filled in a form stating that Lido wished to join the Communist Party. As a P.S., Jenkins wrote, posing as Lido, 'If you do send someone round to my house, could you please be sure to make it latish 'cause of darts.' Punishment 5. Jenkins filled in another form which he sent to the National Front, saying the same thing, in the hope that the two parties would fight outside Lido's front door and embarrass him. Also, he sent the IRA round to his house. Punishment 6. Jenkins had Jehovah's Witnesses sent round to Lido's house. Jenkins wrote to them, saying, 'Most of all, I like people to call on me late at night and talk to me about Christ.' Punishment 7. On Christmas Eve, Jenkins wrote graffiti on the wall of the Gents at an IRA pub in Kilburn. Also got hold of a blank page of A4 paper and a black felt pen and some sellotape, and put a large notice on the wall of the lavatory in an IRA pub saying General Lido, and giving his home address, touches himself while having fantasies about eating Irish Catholic babies for breakfast. Punishment 8. Jenkins rang Customs and Excise at Heathrow Airport to say that whenever Lido travelled, he carried heroin and crack cocaine rectally. And Festenstein says, "That's a bloody good read, Jen. I shall pass these papers to Bernard Greenman when I leave here."